me all again. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Book Stamp. I'm Kate, and today I'm going to be talking about the worst books that I read in 2020 and what I think you should read instead. So for sort of the worst books that I read this year, these were all books that were like 2 stars or less for me, and that I actually had something that I really disliked about them. There were a couple other books that maybe I didn't like very much, I thought were just meh, but these books all have something that was I just did not enjoy about them whatsoever. And instead of just hating on these books, I'm going to recommend you books that I think you should read instead that cover a lot of the same topics, but in my opinion just do it a lot better. So to start off, we're going to be talking about The Hidden Life of Trees. So I've actually seen a lot of people who really enjoyed this book, so I don't want to just immediately bash it. But it is a nonfiction book about the science behind trees and forests and how they develop and grow and communicate with each other. It's a lot about how trees communicate and sort of send messages between each other. And I read this on audiobook, which I don't recommend. I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more if I had read it physically, and so I don't want to completely say don't read this book, especially if you're really interested in this subject. But part of the reason I think that I didn't like this book so much was because earlier this year I read Lab Girl by Hope Jahren, which this is a part memoir, part science book that goes through Hope Jaren's sort of growth as a scientist from her childhood to her present day as a tenured professor at the University of Hawaii, and talks a lot about the science of plants and trees and what we know and what we don't. And I just found her way of telling sort of the same facts and talking about the same things so much more compelling. I also read this physically, and literally the whole time I was listening to The Hidden Life of Trees, I just wanted to reread this book. So I definitely recommend reading Lab Girl by Hope Jahren. It was the best book that I read in the month of January. So I just really loved this book so much, and I felt that Hope Jaren's way of writing the science was just so much better and more compelling than it was in The Hidden Life of Trees. So the next book that I really did not like was Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. Now, I'm not going to go out and say that I am a romance reader. That's definitely sort of not where I live. But I was really excited about Bringing Down the Duke because it's sort of branded as this feminist romance between a suffragette and a duke. And I was just like, that is so good and so clever. I think I would really, really enjoy that. And I read this one on audiobook as well, and I just thought it was so boring. I couldn't keep the characters straight in my head. Our main character isn't even a suffragette because she wants to and really believes in the cause. It's because it's a tenet of the scholarship that she got. And so I just didn't find her romance with the main guy that believable. They basically have insta love, and I just didn't like it. And I thought it really fell flat on a lot of the promises of the book. Just another sort of feminist branded book that I just felt did not pan out in any of that. I didn't feel like the female focused relationships were very strong. It was very cookie cutter to me. I just did not enjoy it very much. And so instead, I'm going to recommend that you read Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, which if you haven't read that book already, go. What are you waiting for? Go read it right now. But Red, White, and Royal Blue is a modern day romance between a fictionalized first son of the United States and Prince of the United Kingdom. And it is just so beautifully written. The characters are so well fleshed out and unique, and I think it really, even though it's a male-male romance, it really delivers on sort of a progressive romance, if that's what, a romance with progressive values, if that's what you're really looking for. I have a whole review where I just gush about this book for 12 minutes. I love it so much. I would die for Henry and Alex. And there's a whole segment in the book about sort of Alex being a Southern man of color and what that means, especially in a political context. And it's so refreshing and was wonderful to have a Southern queer main character who's progressive, and I was just living for Alex the entire time. I would die for Alex Claremont Diaz, let it be known. And so don't bother reading about not wannabe suffragettes when you can read about Alex and Henry. So the next book that I hated was The Grace Year by Kim Lidgett. This is another feminist promise tale that just fails on all fronts. Like, it was branded as this like feminist Hunger Games meets The Handmaid's Tale, except it was like worse. And I actually I think in my August wrap up, I have timestamps on the video, but go check it out if you want to hear me just like totally rant on why I hate this book. But again, it's another feminist book that I feel like just really did not deliver on being feminist or having feminist and like progressive themes, other than the girl being like, I don't want to just get married. But then she does, but then it like refutes itself through the whole narrative, and it's just like literally about all these girls that like go crazy and like want to kill each other. It was just so poorly done. I did not like it at all. And so instead, if you're looking for a progressive-minded YA fantasy, I would recommend Once and Future by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. This book has the best queer representation I've read. It's an Arthurian retelling where we have Arthur recast as a woman, and there are themes of genocide and capitalism and queerness and acceptance and love, and it's just so well done. It's like this spacefaring romp with all of this like main cast of like queer characters, and I loved it so much. It was one of my favorite books of the year. It is so well done and just like so fun and enjoyable, and it's like not like The Grace Year almost like verges into like tragedy porn, and like this book was just so, even though it was dealing with these really heavy topics and like really dark moments, it was still so like in my mind it's still this light, bubbly, like wonderful book. The next book that I hated was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I know that a lot of people really love Daisy Jones and the Six, but I hated it. And I listened to the audiobook, which is like supposed to be really good. It's like all these interviews with all of the characters, and I just didn't care about any of the characters whatsoever. I thought they were all like just whining about their problems that were like not real problems. I did not find Daisy Jones likable at all, and like in fact found her extremely annoying, and I didn't care about her. I found the romance, or not romance, just like boring. So I really didn't like that book at all, and I know it's a beloved fave, and so I was very hesitant when I picked up The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. In fact, I put it off for a really long time because I was like, I did not like Daisy Jones and the Six at all. And boy, was I wrong. I was so wrong. Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo wrecked my little gay heart. Like, it wrecked me. It was so good. So if you have tried a Taylor Jenkins Reid and didn't really like it, I would definitely recommend reading Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. The audiobook made me cry like a little baby. I cried so hard, like so many times. I would die for Evelyn. I would die for Celia. It was so good. I can't wait to reread it. But basically, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is actually structurally very similar to Daisy Jones and the Six. It is an interview with Evelyn Hugo at the end of her life, and she is sort of telling her life story, and so we're just following her life story throughout the book. And it's beautiful, and I loved it so, so, so much. The next book that I hated was Love in the Time of Cholera. So I read this because a lot of people were referencing it sort of when the coronavirus pandemic started, about how it had a lot of things to say about the current pandemic and what like disease and all this stuff blah 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 means. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and give you a trigger warning, but there's like unapologetic rape scenes in this book, and like it was gross. I could not get past it. And I know it's a classic written by a man, but it was just like the point where this woman was like, there was a whole scene, and it was just, it literally ruined the entire book for me. I do think there are good parts of the book, and I can see why it is a classic, but that scene literally, and I normally don't feel like I'm that kind of reader where I can't, especially for time and culture, can't sort of parse out those things. Maybe I'm not, I don't know. But it really, really just like ruined the book for me, and I cannot recommend it to anybody, and I just did not enjoy it. So instead, I'll recommend A Long Petal of the Sea by Isabel Allende, which has a lot of similar themes where it is a multi-generational family tale, sort of dealing with the fallout of the Spanish War, set in, I believe it's in Colombia, so I think they're both set in Colombia. Or no, I think Long Petal of the Sea set in Chile. Anyways, it still deals with a lot of the same themes about socialism and war and what that means for a like personal family. I cried with A Long Petal of the Sea. It was so beautiful. Like the end just really wrecked me emotionally. And it has a lot to say about love and chosen family, and it was just a beautiful story and I really loved it. And I think Isabel Allende is just a beautiful writer and I need to read more of her work. So I definitely recommend that. The next book is Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow, which I did kind of enjoy when I read it. I didn't love it when I read it, but now there has also been a lot of like news coming out about how Ronan Farrow didn't necessarily like check all of his sources, and some of the claims in the book may have been more exaggerated than they really were, especially about all of the stuff that was like how he was like blackballed from bringing the stories about Harvey Weinstein out, which I do believe to an extent, but because there is sort of this question about it, it did like in retrospect bring down my ranking. Also, I felt that the book about the women who were assaulted by Harvey Weinstein was much more focused on Ronan Farrow than it was about the women specifically, and the women that were included were like Gwyneth Paltrow and like A-list celebrity names, which rubbed me a little bit the wrong way, especially after I read She Said, which is from the women who broke the story of the New York Times compared to Ronan at the New Yorker. And their story was 100% focused on the women the entire way throughout. Everything was super fact-checked. And I just thought it was written significantly better and more, even though Ronan Farrow's story was more like, ooh, mystery. I thought theirs was more compelling from a personal narrative perspective. And so in that case, I would recommend that you only read She Said and not worry about Catch and Kill. And the last book that I read that I really did not like was Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Robertson, I think. And there's nothing really wrong with Sorcery of Thorns. There was one scene that really rubbed me the wrong way, which was where she revealed that the main character, the main guy character, whose name I don't even remember, was bisexual, and there was literally a throwaway line about, he's like, I'm also interested in men. Is that going to be a problem for you? To like our main girl. And then there's literally no other textual references to him being bi throughout the entire book. Like, it's literally 2 lines in a like 400-page novel. And I do think like male bisexual representation is so important. It is so important, but it needs to be good. Like, it needs to not be forgettable in that way. And I just felt it very like she just was like, ooh, let me like have a LGBTQ lead and like be able to check that box, but not actually explore what that means from a like character level. And so that rubbed me the wrong way, and every time I think about that book, that's all I think about. I do think it failed on a lot of other levels. I have a more thorough review in one of my monthly wrap-ups, which I will link if you want to read it, watch it. And instead, I'm going to recommend Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is the best YA fantasy book I read this year, and I feel like it really delivered. It promised a lot about grief and colonialism and the legacy of slavery and gender issues, and I feel like it delivered on every single front in such an amazing and well thought out and well written way, whereas I felt like Sorcery of Thorns tried to do a lot of those things and really failed. And so I recommend reading Legendborn instead. I have an entire vlog where I just gush about this book, so go watch it. Anyway, so those are the worst books I read this year and the ones I recommend that you should read instead. So thanks for hanging out. Please leave in the comments down below if you've read any of those books, if you also didn't like them, if I'm wrong and you loved them, please let me know. But thanks for hanging out, y'all.